genetic level is a powerful ability. That is why it must be done with precaution, with ethics, with broader societal values and costs and benefits of the technology, including the economy, taken into consideration, and in recognition of the fact that proprietary interests are the main player in the genetically engineered field. Here in New Zealand we have a founding agreement that also affirms Māori have sovereignty over taonga and thereby protects Indigenous species from proprietary ownership and modification without consent, and the important considerations of Waitangi 262 claims and finding. Genetic medicine, Madam Speaker, is not contentious and has always been supported by the Greens, from insulin through to vaccines, and so too is contained precision fermentation. The release of live self-replicating organisms into the environment and agricultural systems is a different story. This particular legislation is a reckless rush job of potentially monumental proportions because it has failed to take into account those who are most impacted by this liberalisation of the current regime. It is extraordinary, Madam Speaker, that this government has not done a full economic analysis of the impact of this legislation, and the only one done by New Zealand Institute of Economic Research finds a potential $10 to $20 billion cost of our existing value-added component to our primary production sector. That is an extraordinary cost to risk, Madam Speaker. And what is more, when it is assessed as to the marginal costs and benefits of the package and the regulatory impact statement, when GMOs are eventually released according to that statement into the environment under the proposed regime, there will be additional costs to certify products as GMO-free. In the Australian canola example, the additional certification costs are estimated to be $14 per tonne, which is to say the burden of remaining GMO-free, as every current producer in this country is, whether you're an animal producer or a fruit or a vegetable producer or a crop producer, that burden will now fall onto those producers to prove their non-GMO status. It is expected that additional costs to obtain is the word that is used. This premium should be borne by those seeking to obtain value from it, which is to say, and farmers of New Zealand, you should hear this out, you no longer are maintaining your current GE-free status, you in fact are having to pay the cost of obtaining it. This legislation effectively forfeits New Zealand's current non-GMO producer status at a cost of potentially tens of billions of dollars to the economy. What an extraordinarily reckless piece of legislation this is, Madam Chair. One would hope that this was actually treated with true scientific rigour and assessment of the evidence. The evidence of genetic engineering is that the hyperbolic claims made by the Luxon government for what it can do are not borne out by what we've seen in 30 years of commercial production of GE crops. New Zealand is not an outlier in having a rigorous regulatory regime. There are only actually 27 countries in the world that have commercial production of GE crops out of 195 countries. Most of those countries are in the Americas, and of the four main commodity crops produced, 99% of the global acreage is those four crops: soy, maize, cotton, canola. They mostly end up as animal feed or as biofuels. There is no single product that has high commercial value that is sold as direct human food in the global market. After 40 years of billions of dollars of investment in the United States and thousands of field trials. So when the government suggests that somehow us forfeiting our GMO-free status is going to get us some sort of high-value product, it just doesn't bear out with the evidence of what GE does. And the Minister talks about genetically engineering apples. Well, we currently have a potential 95% premium on New Zealand apples because they are GMO-free. And there is no genetically engineered apple sold anywhere in the world that has extra commercial value. In fact, I don't know of any. So let's be clear that when we evaluate how best to use GE, such as its amazing opportunities in medicine, which is not contentious, the cost to New Zealand farmers of that forfeiture, whereby they will wear the burden, is a big cost, and they should be screaming blue murder, frankly, for this government being willing to sacrifice and risk the value of their primary production industry. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, that is actually quite interesting what he has said there, that the burden to prove yourself to be GMO-free will be assumed that you are, unless you sit there and say that, say and pay that you're not.
Yeah, so it's one of those weird days where I agree with everyone. So it's a bit interesting the way how countries determine the difference between GE and GMO. Some countries like Brazil and Argentina, they look at GMO and they say, okay, GMO is when you grab something else from a different species and you insert it into the species that you're editing for. So there's a lot of differences in language around that. GE is, and again, biologists, please feel free to freak out. GE, I'm pretty sure, is referring to just taking genes from the same species and then taking what you want from that. So yeah, there's a little bit of difference there between GE and GMO from what I've read about. Yeah, he's right about the organic stuff. I think there is a way to resolve that problem, though, if the government's willing to give support to organic farmers. I don't know if they will. This is national we're talking about.
Yeah.
They haven't even provided in their impact statement the amount of growth that this is going to potentially result in and whether it's actually worth it or not.
Yeah, that's a good point about that. Yeah, will it actually deliver the results that's intended? Like
comparing the organic sector to the biotech sector. But I think there is a way to have these two side by side and not have them directly competing against each other. But yeah, that is definitely a select committee issue. I
Yeah.
don't have the answers.
Yeah.